Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees and here are today's top stories. Wales becomes the first nation in the UK to provide the Moderna vaccine. Pupils in England's secondary schools and colleges are required to wear masks after Easter. And the University of Oxford has suspended its trial of the AstraZeneca vaccine on children. Today in Wales, the first person receives the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. It comes as the supply of shots from AstraZeneca starts to slow.
Britain began rolling out Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine on Wednesday in Wales. A 24-year-old woman was the first person in the UK to receive a shot.
I'm an unpaid carer for my grandmother, so it's very important to me that I can get it so that I can care for her properly and be safe.
The government expects a rollout of the Moderna vaccine in the rest of the UK by the middle of April, and it comes as the supply of shots from AstraZeneca start to slow due to manufacturing issues. The government warned that vaccine rollout would slow in April, but said the country remained on track to provide a first dose to all adults by the end of July. The UK has ordered about 17 million doses of the Moderna jab, enough for over 8 million people. Moderna uses the same mRNA technology as Pfizer, but is easier to store and to transport. It's the third vaccine authorised in the UK. Across the UK, over 31 million people have received a first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, and over 5 million people are fully vaccinated. That's about 60% of the total adult population who have received one shot.
Children across the UK are currently enjoying Easter school holidays. For pupils in Year 7 and above in England, though, the return to school will look rather like it did before the break. The Department for Education has said that mask wearing for adults and pupils in England's secondary schools should continue until Step 3 of lockdown easing.
The government, taking a cautious approach to mask wearing in schools, is calling for their continued use when schools return after the Easter break. The Department of Education says it's an extra precaution, but a temporary one. Its statement says, "We expect to no longer recommend face coverings in classrooms or for pupils in communal areas as part of Step 3 of the roadmap out of the lockdown." As usual, that comes with a note of uncertainty, as it would remain dependent on the data. According to the government's roadmap, Step 3 of lockdown easing will start no earlier than May the 17th. That means around 5 more weeks of masks for most students. The department also says that secondary school pupils are expected to continue getting tested for the virus twice a week. Education Secretary Gavin Williamson says, the return to schools and colleges from early March has been successful, and data show attendance in schools remain higher than at any point during the autumn term. Children in England had around 4 weeks of in-person learning after schools closed during the third national lockdown. Time that Williamson says was important for bringing structure back to children's lives. In an article in The Telegraph, he says, the prolonged month of lockdown will inevitably have had an impact on behaviour. It's something that was anticipated by principals and head teachers upon last month's return of pupils.
But we're prepared for any of the inconsistencies that might be thrown up in terms of their behaviour. We're prepared for that as well.
Williamson called for a strong behaviour culture in schools, where students are taught how to behave well and are clear about what is expected of them. Williamson is also throwing his weight behind a mobile phone ban at schools.
The University of Oxford said on Tuesday it had paused testing the AstraZeneca vaccine on children and teenagers. It's while it waits for more data on rare blood clotting issues.
A UK trial testing the effectiveness of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine on children and teenagers has been paused. Oxford University said on Tuesday it had put the trial on hold while it waits for more data on a possible link between the vaccine and rare blood clots. The trial's disruption is just the latest blow for AstraZeneca's vaccine, once hailed as a milestone in the fight against the pandemic. Oxford University said while there were no safety concerns in the paediatric trial, it would await guidance from the UK drugs watchdog before administering any more shots. A high proportion of the reported cases were among younger women, but many experts say there's no definitive evidence yet of a particular risk for that group. The World Health Organization says it expects no changes to its assessment that the shot's benefits outweigh any risks. Dozens of countries have approved the use of the vaccine, and millions of doses of it have been safely administered around the world. However, Germany, France and the Netherlands have restricted its use to their older populations while investigations continue.
A new study by Oxford psychiatrists suggests COVID-19 can result in mental and neurological problems. Researchers found that many COVID survivors are suffering from anxiety and depression.
Oxford researchers looked at more than 200,000 COVID-19 patients, mostly from the United States. They found that 1 in 3 survivors were diagnosed with a brain or psychiatric illness within 6 months. Anxiety and depression were the most common conditions. The researchers say cases of stroke, dementia and other neurological disorders were rarer but were still significant. This suggests the pandemic could lead to a wave of mental and neurological problems. Experts say the findings are worrying, as it will contribute to already rising levels of mental illness. The study was published in the Lancet Psychiatry Journal.
The pandemic has changed British life in all kinds of ways and may have also had an impact on our taste buds. New data shows that Brits spent over a third more on sweets this Easter compared to last year. According to market researcher Nielsen IQ, people in the UK spent £439 million on sweets in the month before Easter. It's a 34% rise compared with the same period last year. At the same time, clothing sales doubled and home and garden items also saw very strong growth. Industry experts say consumers may be indulging themselves in some retail therapy as they look forward to warmer weather and the end of lockdown. The BBC has said it will invest more into programs for young people. But at the same time, in a letter to a viewer, the broadcaster wrote that over 50-year-olds should be happy with shows made for a general audience.
In its annual plan, the BBC said it is planning to bring much more content specifically aimed at audiences aged 16 to 34, and it is investing an extra £40 million into the relaunch of BBC Three to make sure its programmes reach as many young people as possible. At the same time, the BBC wrote in a letter to a viewer, it won't make shows for an older audience. It wrote, our approach has to be general and broad, so there needs to be a degree of compromise. It was a reply to a letter by a licence fee payer who complained that older people were not represented enough on screen.
In the headlines recently, the Me Too moment in schools with many teens alleging abuse. It's raised concerns that easy access to pornographic material could be a driving factor. NTD's Jane Worrell has the story. A warning that this report contains some distressing themes.
Schools have recently been caught up in allegations of abuse, branded a Me Too moment in education. It's fueled concerns that easy access to pornography could be contributing to the problem.
If young people are exposed to pornography at a very young age and they believe, as my research has supported, that it's realistic, then it has an influence in the way that young people perceive sexual relationships, perceive women. And let's be honest, women in pornography are often objectified, mistreated, and the element of consent is somewhat blurred within pornography itself.
Marta Lozzo co-led research several years ago that involved speaking to 1,100 boys and girls aged 11 to 16 about pornography. It found around half of them said they had already seen online pornographic material at least once, with some younger people coming across it accidentally.
Just to give you a number, just half of the boys, which is just over 53%, who had seen pornography thought that it was realistic, compared to 39% of the girls.
The British Journal of Criminology this week published analysis of over 130,000 video titles on adult websites in the UK. It found that around 1 in 8 video titles shown on the homepage described activities considered sexually violent. Researchers found the material was available with little or no age verification. It's known that this isn't a new problem, but pornographic material has become more accessible in recent years. There are continued calls to add age verification on such websites. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
In other news, the Quad Alliance, consisting of the US, Japan, India and Australia, is joining a military exercise led by France. The 5 nations say they are trying to improve maritime security in the Indo-Pacific in order to confront Beijing's aggression. The 3-day exercise is held in the Bay of Bengal and began there on Monday. It first started in 2019, but this is the first time that India is also joining. The French embassy in India says this is an opportunity to promote cooperations in a free and open Indo-Pacific. And in other news, Germany also seems to be getting more serious about countering China's communist regime in the Indo-Pacific region. The country's defense minister described communist China as a very power-conscious state, not only when it comes to its economic interests and its immediate regional neighbors. Speaking to German media RND last Saturday, she added, China clearly claims to shape the world order in its own way and to force the weaker to behave in a certain way. We, that is to say Europe and the West, must not be the weaker ones. Later this month, Germany's foreign minister and defense minister will meet with their Japanese counterparts. This meeting will focus on the Chinese regime's increasing aggression in the Indo-Pacific region. This will be the first meeting of this kind between the two countries. And in August, a German warship is set to cross the South China Sea. This will be the first time in almost 2 decades. Up next, not just in the UK, a poll in France shows most French people are very opposed to the idea of vaccine passports. Find out more when we return.